Good morning. We're going to begin with Maseches Shviis. Some people have asked me to remind everybody before the Shiur to please, everybody put your Zoom on mute. And we'll begin in a moment. We're in Maseches Shviis, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Vav. We began Mishnah Vav, and we're still in the halachas. The Perek is dedicated to Tosfos Shviis. What things can't you do in the 6th year before Shviis actually starts? And as we mentioned over and over again, the halachas in this Perek, according to the way we paskin, are not triggered unless the Beis Hamikdash is standing. So, unfortunately, the Beis Hamikdash is not standing. The B'Ritzayin Hashem Mama should be rebuilt today. Until that time, this idea of Tosfos Shviis, we add to the 7th year of Shemitah, is not triggered. So, you can do all the work you want in your field all the way until Rosh Hashanah of the 7th year. If the Beis Hamikdash, Mitzvah Hashem, will be rebuilt, all these halachas will be triggered. How long can you plow a tree field? How long can you plow a grain field? We've really not as yet dealt with a grain field. That will be Perek Beis. We're dealing with a tree field. And in a tree field, to take a step back, there are two shittas in Tosfos Shviis that we learned about, two opinions about where we learned out that there are prohibitions of Shemitah in the 6th year. That was Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva holds that Tosfos Shviis is derived from a pasuk in the Torah. It's in the written Torah. The 3 words that we've talked about many times in Parshas Kisisa. It says 6 days you shall work, and on the 7th day you shall stop working, and don't plow your fields, and don't cut your fields. So if you read the pasuk in context, it sounds like the whole pasuk is talking about the 7th day of the week. 6 days work, 7th day don't work. And on the 7th day, don't plow or cut your field. Of course, there's a difficulty there. There are 39 avos malachas, 39 things that are the basic general categories of work you cannot do on Shabbos Kodesh. Why would the Rebbeinu Shalom say, work 6 days, don't work on the 7th day, don't plow, and don't cut on the 7th day? Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom say, and don't remove an object from the private domain to the public domain, and don't remove the bad food from the good food, and don't plant things, and don't sow things? Why do Rebbeinu Shalom pick on those two? So therefore, Rabbi Akiva learns that those 3 words, B'chorish u'v'kotze tishbos, are not talking about the 7th day of the week. The last part of the pasuk, the first part of the pasuk, you shall work 6 days and stop working on the 7th day, is talking about the 7th day of the week. The last 3 words of the pasuk are talking about the rules of Shemitah. But it can't be talking about the 7th year itself. Do not plow, do not cut in the 7th year, because we have psukim that tell us that in Parshas Bahar. So what do these 3 words mean? Rabbi Akiva says these 3 words are teaching us the rules of Tosfos Shviis. You cannot plow at some point in the 6th year, and in the 8th year you cannot cut. You cannot cut in the 8th year for the benefit of fruits that are still Kedusha Shviis. There are fruits that blossom in the 7th year. They have Kedusha Shviis. They're not going to be picked until the 8th year. The fact that you pick them in the 8th year does not mean they're not Shemitah fruit. They are Shemitah fruit. They blossomed in the 7th year. So if you have a tree that blossomed in the 7th year, and you want to pick that fruit in the 8th year, that fruit has Kedusha Shviis, and the rules of Shviis apply to that tree. So pruning that tree, doing different things to that tree, have the rules of Shemitah to it. So Rabbi Akiva says, B'chorish u'v'kotze tishbos means that in the 6th year, you do not plow at some given point. And in the 8th year, you do not cut for fruits that blossom in the 7th year. So that's Rabbi Akiva Shita. I know Tosef Shviis from 3 words in the written Torah. Rabbi Shmuel disagrees. Rabbi Shmuel says, Tishbos. We talked about this many times already. He learns out the new halacha that you're allowed on if the 16th day of Nisan, the first day Chol Hamoed Pesach, comes out on Shabbos, and you have to cut the barley grain in order to make the Minchas HaOmer, you're allowed to cut. That's a special rule. You're allowed to cut that barley, not you or I. It's a base that cuts it. And they're allowed to do it even on Shabbos to prepare the Minchas HaOmer to be brought that day on the 16th Nisan Shabbos. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, Tosef Shviis comes from a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's an oral transmission to Moshe. So again, 2 different shitas. Rabbi Akiva says the rules of Tosef Shviis come out of 3 words in the Torah, and Rabbi Shmuel says that the halachas of Tosef Shviis comes from an oral transmission to Moshe. The difference between those 2 shitas, according to Rabbi Akiva, there is a din of Tosef Shviis even today when the Beis Hamikdash is not standing, because it's 3 written words in the Torah, and it says you must keep Tosef Shviis. It doesn't say anything about a Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Yishmael holds that the oral transmission that was given to Moshe said that you keep Tosef Shviis, do not plow in the 6th year, and that halacha l'Moshe Misinai also said, Moshe, Tosef Shviis is 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, which means about Rosh Chodesh Elul, stop plowing the field. That's Rabbi Yishmael's Shita. The halacha l'Moshe Misinai said, A, 30 days before stop plowing, B, only when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. Beis Hamikdash is not standing, unfortunately. Shebanim Hevimenu today, B'Ritzayin Hashem Mamish. Therefore, there's no Tosef Shviis Bizman Hazeh. And we learned already, Rabbi Gamliel Ubeis Dinai decided that they were going to paskin like Rabbi Yishmael, and therefore Tosef Shviis is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's not written in the Torah, and that halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that all transmission said only when the Beis Hamikdash is standing, and only 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. The shita of Beis Hillel, that a tree field you stop plowing Shavuos, that's of rabbinic nature. So if you have Rabbi Yishmael flowing in or combining Rabbi Yishmael with Beis Hillel, the halacha l'Moshe Misinai says no plowing 30 days before Shemitah when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. Came Beis Hillel and said, we're going to extend that period of time rabbinically, and you can't plow your field beginning Shavuos. So it's not just the 30 days of the oral transmission to Moshe. It's all the way back to Shavuos, which that period from Shavuos until Rosh Chodesh El is of rabbinic nature. None of this is halacha bisman hazeh because there is no Beis Hamikdash. Now we're in Perek Aleph Mishnah Vav, and we're going to be learning about another halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and that's why I wanted to introduce again this whole idea of Rabbi Yishmael and halacha l'Moshe Misinai, because we're going to see a new point in the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Until now, we talked about tree field, defined by halacha as 3 trees, not little baby trees, saplings. We call baby trees saplings. We're talking about 3 trees. Now, what is a baby tree and what is a sapling? Patience. We're going to get to that Mishnah Bli Neder today. The basic halacha that we were dealing with until now, 3 trees in a Beit Sa'ah. Each one of the 3 trees can produce what we call the Shisha Mana B'Talgi. We called it a pound of pressed fig cake. Each tree can produce that, and you're in 50 Sa'ah. You can plow the entire field until Shavuos. Less than 3 trees, the conversation doesn't start. 3 trees, and one of them does not produce the 1 pound of fig, you don't have a tree field. You have the default grain field, even though there are trees living there, trees growing there, trees, fig cake for each tree. If it can't do that, it is not a tree field. It goes to the default setting. It's a grain field. And a grain field, you can only plow till Pesach. And between Pesach and Shavuos, you can only do that minimum shear under the branches of the tree. 1 amma for the person who would be picking the tree, and 1 amma for his basket. Okay, that's what we call Kedei Tzorcha. Now we go to a new rule. Vav, Esen Netios, page 395 in the Behira, Esen Netios Mefuzaros B'toch Beis Sa'ah. We're still talking about a Beit Sa'ah. Beit Sa'ah was a very common measurement of a field in those times. 50 amos. By 50 amos, 2,500 square amos. And there are 10 saplings that are spread across the Beit Sa'ah. You have a picture on page 395, picture 15. Little young trees. They're spread out. Spread out is very important here, as we'll see later in this Mishnah. Harshim kol Beit Sa'ah b'shvilam ad Rosh Hashanah. You can plow the entire field until Rosh Hashanah. In other words, this is a new halacha in the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Why am I saying this halacha l'Moshe Sinai? The Gemara in numerous places, in Tainis, and Daf Gimel and Aleph, and Moed Katan, according to at least one sheet in the Gemara says that there are 3 halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now there are many more halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but these 3 are grouped always together. 1, as it's called Esen Netios, the 10 saplings. 2, Arava, the fact that during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they would take Aravas and make hakafas around the Mizbeach. What we do today with the lulav, the esrog, the Aravas and the Hadassim, every day we go around the bima once, the bima being symbolic of the Mizbeach. We go around the bima once and we say Hoshana. And Hoshana Rabbah, we go around the bima 7 times. So that's a way to commemorate the Avod in the Beis Hamikdash. Every day they would make a hakafa around the Mizbeach with Aravas. And on Hoshana Rabbah, they would go around the Mizbeach 7 times with Aravas. So why do we go around it with the lul of the Esrik, Hadassim, and Aravas? Why do we do it every day with all 4 minim? Why don't we do it every day just with the Arava? Very good question. The Gemara deals with that, the Halacha deals with that, but that's how our minute came about. On Hoshana Rabbah, after we do the 7 hakafas, at some point in the davening, we put down the daled minim and we only hold the 5 aravas. But that halacha, that on Sukkot we go around the Mizbeach with aravas, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's not written in the Torah. Esen Netios, the 10 sapling rule, not written in the Torah, part of the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The third one is Nisa Chamayim. We pour water on the Mizbeach along with wine. The whole year when we bring the Korban Tamid, we pour wine on the Mizbeach, as we learned in Maseches Tamid. And on Sukkot, besides wine, we pour water. And that's what the simplest Beis HaShoeva is about, the drawing of the water. The water is poured on the Mizbeach. That too, according to the sheet in the Gemara, is not written in the Torah. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So 3 halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Esen Netios, 10 saplings. Make hakafas around the Mizbeach with Arava and pour water on the Mizbeach on Sukkot, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So if we follow Rabbi Yishmael's shita, Rabbi Yishmael says there's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai transmitted orally to Moshe that there is something called tos v'shviis. In the 6th year, you stop plowing a tree field 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh El. Again, the Shavuos is rabbinic in nature. It has nothing to do with halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So Rabbi Shmuel says the Rabbanu Shalom revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu halacha l'Moshe Sinai. 1, Shemitah is in the 7th year, but you shall stop plowing 30 days before Rosh Chodesh Elul, stop plowing a tree field. Second Moshe, there's something called esenetios. There's something called a sapling tree field. That field does not have tosra Shviis. That field can be plowed. If it has 10 trees, 10 saplings, and a Beit Sa'ah, you can plow all the way till Rosh Hashanah. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbeinu Shalom, says, if you have 3 trees in a Beit Sa'ah, there is going to be tosra Shviis of 30 days beforehand. Whether Rebbeinu Shalom told him the 3 trees, etc., that's a question. But the Rebbeinu Shalom revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu there's something called tosra Shviis 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. You stop plowing a tree field. But Moshe Rabbeinu, if it's a sapling tree field, you don't have to stop plowing Rosh Chodesh Elul the 30 days. You can plow the field until Rosh Hashanah. So page 395, esenetios, 10 saplings, mefuzaros, spread out, betoch Beit Sa'ah, in the Beit Sa'ah, charshim kol Beit Sa'ah b'shvilam, ad Rosh Hashanah. You can plow the whole Beit Sa'ah for the sake of these 10 saplings until Rosh Hashanah. Let's take a look in the top of the page on the left-hand side, Iketos V'Syantiv, footnote Yud Aleph, Ad Rosh Hashanah. The Lashon Harash, the Rash, a famous commentary to say this Royim, says, Esenetias halacha l'Moshe Sinai. This halacha of 10 saplings is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The Chasa HaTorah al Mamoinam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Rachmanis on Jewish money. We talked about this when we introduced the Mishnah. We learned about this in Midos. We learned about this in Tamid. There are 2 different things that go on that are 2 sides of the same coin. One is Ein Aniyas B'Mokem Ashiris. When you're in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Beis HaMikdash, you don't show poverty. It's a palace. You're not cheap in a palace. You spend what you need to make sure the palace looks the way it should look. And on the other hand, there were places in the Beis HaMikdash where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, according to Chazal, told us, don't spend more money, because the Torah has Rahmanas on Jewish money. When do you say spend the money? When do you say don't spend the money? This is something that Chazal understood and transmitted to us. But those are 2 different, they're opposite halachas. Spend the money, don't spend the money, but they're 2 sides of the same coin. You just need to know through Chazal which one to use. So here we have an example of Torah Chasam Manim Shel Yisrael. Shem lo yacharosh lahen. They're saplings, they're baby trees. If you don't plow the field as long as you can until Rosh Hashanah of Shemitah, lahem misyapshos, the ein kochen yafik kizakrenos. They will dry up because these saplings are not as mature and strong as a full-grown tree, and they need that plowing. Again, what's the plowing for? In a tree field, the farmers used to plow the field so long as they felt there was any moisture in the ground. They wanted the moisture, the rain, the water to get deep into the ground so that it can sustain the roots. So they would periodically plow tree fields because they wanted to turn the soil and get the water as far down as it can. So for a tree field, the standard tree field, 3 mature trees in a Beit Sa'ah, rabbinically you stop plowing at Shavuos because that's basically, there's no real moisture left in the ground. The ground has dried up basically in Eretz Yisrael. And if you plow after Shavuos, there's no point to it for a mature tree field. The only possibility for plowing the field after Shavuos in Eretz Yisrael, where you have a mature tree field, is you're preparing the field for the 7th year. And that's what people will think you're doing. Nireh kimasakein. It looks like you're preparing the field for the 7th year, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. And as we mentioned in the introduction to Shviis, a lot of the halachas of Shviis have to do with not so much what you're doing is prohibited, but a lot more with what you're doing appears to other people to be prohibited. And in Shviis, in Hilchos Shviis, we're very cautious about what other people will think we're doing. And we're going to get to that later in the Masechta when we have a discussion about this Nira Kimasake. But that's what we're dealing with here. It looks like you're preparing it for the 7th year, so we don't plow after Shavuos. However, a sapling field, when a person walks by a field, he sees 10 young trees, and it's after Shavuos, and he sees the owner plowing the field, he will not think he's preparing the field for Shemitah, because by looking at the trees and seeing that they're saplings, people understand that farmers constantly plow the field, because even if there was a tiny amount of moisture left, they continuously plowed the field because these saplings needed every drop of water in order to take root and grow. So when a person passed by a field and saw Reuven plowing his field after Shavuos and plowing his field after Rosh Chodesh Elul, and the field has these 10 saplings in it, he didn't think that he's preparing the field for Shavuot, for Shemitah. He's not doing anything. He's helping the field grow with the saplings that are there. He's not doing anything for the 7th year. So therefore, Esen etias mefuzoros betoch beit sa'ah, choshen kol beit sa'ah b'shvilam, 10 saplings spread out in a beit sa'ah. You can plow the whole beit sa'ah for them, for their health and sustenance, ad Rosh Hashanah, all the way to Rosh Hashanah. Again, so while a mature tree field, you only need 3 in a beit sa'ah, a mature tree field, you only need 3 in the beit sa'ah, and then you can plow to Shavuos. The sapling tree field, you need at least 10 to make it a sapling field, and then you can plow until Rosh Hashanah. So there are 2 different halachas here. A mature tree field only needs 3, but you can only plow till Shavuos. A sapling tree field, you need 10 in the same beit sa'ah, but you can plow until Rosh Hashanah. Turning now to page 396, this is the halacha of mefuzoros. The 10 saplings have to be spread around the field. Hoyu asuyo shura. Instead of picture 15 on page 395, where the 10 saplings are spread across the field, and therefore logically, a person's looking at this and he sees there are 10 saplings spread around the field. The farmer needs to plow the entire field for the benefit of these saplings, which are spread in the whole field. But hoyu asuyo shura. If the 10 saplings are planted in a row, as in picture 16, so you have 10 saplings in a row. They can be in the middle of the field, they can be in the left corner, the right corner, the top, the bottom, but they're together in a row. You can't plow the whole field for them because there's no reason to plow the whole field for them. The most you need to plow is around the trees. The rest of the field is irrelevant to those 10 saplings, whereas 3 mature trees, mature big trees, drink a lot of water. So if there are 3 trees, even if they're close together, as long as there is 4 amos between the trees, remember we learned about the 4 amos. So if you go back and look on page 390, picture 2, you have a beit sa'ah, 3 mature trees next to each other, but there's 4 amos between each tree. You can plow that entire 50 sa'ah, even though there's only 3 trees in the middle. Because of they're older and stronger and bigger, they need more water. You can plow the whole 50 sa'ah to get the moisture underground to these 3 large trees which have large roots. On the other hand, when you're dealing with saplings, there are smaller roots in the ground, and if you put them together in a limited area, as on page 396, picture 16, there's no need to plow that whole field. The only thing you need to do for purposes of the 6th year is to plow around those trees. They're right next to each other. They still need to be 4 amos away from each other. But because of the way you planted them, they're not mifuzarot, they're not spread everywhere. They're condensed, again, with 4 amos between them. You only need to plow around them. There's no need to plow the rest of the field because these are saplings. They need the water, but the water they need is whatever water is around the trees, not the whole field. That's one case. In that case, you can only plow around the trees till Rosh Hashanah. Umukafes Torah, or they were surrounded like a crown. Now, surrounded like a crown has 2 pshatim. If you take a look at picture, we'll look at the Rambam first, picture 18 on 396. Someone planted his trees instead of in a straight row. He planted them, they look like a crown. So again, they're condensed in one area. If you look at picture 18, the lower half of the field has the 10 saplings. The top half of the field is completely empty. Again, to plow these 10 saplings in picture 18, you can do it until Rosh Hashanah, but only directly around the 10 saplings. So how would that work? You can plow the 10 saplings until Rosh Chodesh Elul, and on Rosh Chodesh Elul you have to stop plowing the whole field, and then you can only do what's needed. So we're dealing with the same type of halacha but different time zones. A mature tree field, you can plow all the way till Shavuos. A sapling tree field, you can plow all the way till Rosh Hashanah. But what happens in a mature tree field where one of the trees is not giving off a pound of fig cake? What do? You can plow the whole field till Pesach. From Pesach till Shavuos, you can only do right around the trees. Mature tree field. Now let's go to a sapling tree field. 10 saplings spread across the field. You can plow the whole field until Rosh Hashanah. If they're not spread around the field, they're planted in one line like in picture 16, or they're planted like a crown like in picture 18, then you can plow the whole field until Rosh Chodesh Elul. When Rosh Chodesh Elul comes, you can only plow just around the trees until Rosh Hashanah. The other pshat of Mukafas Torah is picture 17, and that comes from the Rav and the Tosfos HaRosh. Mukafas Torah, it's surrounded by a crown. Doesn't mean like the Rambam in picture 18, you planted the trees like a crown on someone's head. 17 means it's in complete mukaf, it's completely encircled by a crown. Here, a crown means a fence. So you have in picture 17, 10 saplings. It's in a field that's 50 sa'ah by 50 sa'ah. But for whatever reason, the owner of the field built a fence around the 10 saplings. Maybe the owner of the field has children, grandchildren, and he wants them to be able to play in the field, but he doesn't want them to interfere with the trees. So he puts up a fence around the 10 saplings, and now the children and grandchildren can play in the area outside the fence, but inside the 50 sa'ah. Because, again, the 10 saplings are not spread out in the 50 sa'ah, this is the same halacha, except just a different picture. 17 and 18 have the same halacha. You can plow that field until Rosh Chodesh Elul, and from Rosh Chodesh Elul to Rosh Hashanah, you can only plow around the trees. So the Mishnah says, again, on page 396, Hayu Asuya Shura, if the 10 saplings are planted in a row, picture 16, Umukafas Torah, or they're surrounded like a crown, picture 18 Rambam, or the other pshat, Mukafas HaTorah, they're surrounded by a fence, picture 17. Ein Chorshim Lahem Ella Litzarkan. You can only plow that which is the necessary minimum, which we call under the branches of the tree, an amma for the person who's picking the fruit of the tree, and an amma for the basket. That's the limited minimum shear. That you can do from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Rosh Hashanah. Mishnah Zayin. Hanatios v'hadiluim. Diluim are the Rav and many Mefarshim hold. It's some kind of gourd, but it's a Greek gourd. If you look at your Rav at the top of page 396, Hanatios v'hadiluim mitzdarf l'beit sa'ah. He says bedalat yivanit. Talks about Greek gourds. And the reason he's talking about, the Mishnah is talking about Greek gourds, is because Greek gourds are big, and when they grow, they look like a small tree. So therefore, the Mishnah says the Greek gourds, under certain conditions, can have the halacha of a sapling tree. How? So the Mishnah says, Hadnetios v'hadiluim mitzdarfim l'toch beit sa'ah. The way the Rav learns the Mishnah is as follows. If you have 6 tree saplings and 4 of these gourd kind of trees, it equals 10. And then you have a sapling field, and you can plow that whole field until Rosh Hashanah. If you have 7 sapling trees and 3 gourds, same thing. 8 and 2, same thing. 9 and 1, same thing. The point is, for the diluim, for these Greek gourds, to create the tree, the field to be a sapling field, you have to have the majority of sapling trees and a minority of these Greek gourds. If you had 6 Greek gourds and 4 sapling trees, it would not be a sapling field. That's the first opinion, and the Mishnah is a special rule about these Greek gourds. They look like small trees, and they need the amount of water of a small tree. The fascinating part when you learn Zeroyim, this is sort of an example, is how much Chazal understood about everything, but how much they understood about agriculture. What kind of gourd needs water? Oh, there's something called the Greek gourd. It grows like a sapling. It actually needs water like a sapling. It's amazing how much Chazal knew about, when you learn Maseches Shabbos, about animals, big animals, small animals, what they can carry. You learn Zeroyim, and you learn about their understanding about basic and then complicated agricultures. Here's an example. Hanatias Vadaluim, you have your sapling tree, you have 6 pomegranate newly planted trees, and 4 of these gourd young trees. You have a sapling esenetios sapling field, and you can plow the whole field until Rosh Hashanah. But it has to be majority of sapling trees and a minority of these gourds. Mitzdarf page 397. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees with the first opinion of the Mishnah. He holds you don't need the 6:4 ratio. Kol asara delum lebeit sa'ah. Even if the whole 50 sa'ah, the whole field, has 10 of these Greek gourd trees in it. Greek gourds have absolutely the same halacha as a sapling tree. And if a person has a 50 sa'ah by 50 sa'ah, he has a beit sa'ah field with 10 of these Greek gourds growing there, Chorshim kol beit sa'ah Rosh Hashanah. You can plow the whole field until Rosh Hashanah, meaning these gourds have the same exact halacha as a sapling. So if you take a look at picture 20, at the bottom of page 397, well, picture 19, that's the first sheet in the Mishnah. It shows you have to have 6 saplings and 4 gourds, and then you can plow to Rosh Hashanah. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, and that's a picture 20, even if the Beit Zohar has 10 gourds growing in it, no tree saplings, it has the halacha of a tree sapling field, and you can plow the whole field for them until Rosh Hashanah. And the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay. Do one more Mishnah. Ad emosai nikru netius. How long is a tree called a sapling? At what point does a little baby tree get the halachic status of a mature tree? And there's a world of difference between the two, right? Saplings, you need 10 in the Beit Zohar, and once you have 10, you can plow till Rosh Hashanah. If it gets the status of a mature tree, you need 3, not 10. You need 3 in the same Beit Zohar, but then you can only plow till Shavuos, not till Rosh Hashanah. So there's a world of difference between the sapling and the mature tree. How long is a tree a sapling? Ad emosai nikru netios. How long is a tree called a sapling? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer ad sheyacholu. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds that a tree is considered a sapling until you take the kedusha off the tree. When you plant a tree, for 3 years, there's halacha of orla. You're not allowed to eat the fruits of the tree. My experience here, when I have planted fruit trees, when you buy the baby fruit trees at the Mishtala, for 3 years, nothing grows on it at any rate. And then there's the question when you buy more mature trees and you replant it, that's an orla question. But generally, when you buy baby trees and you plant them, you're not going to see fruit for 3 years anyways. But assuming you see fruit for 3 years, you're not allowed to eat the fruit for 3 years. In the 4th year, the fruit that appears in the 4th year is called neta ravai. It's the blossoms of the 4th year, and they have a special halacha. You can either take that fruit to Yerushalayim and eat it in Yerushalayim, or it's sort of like Meiser Sheni. You can be poda it, you can redeem it. You pay the value of the fruit. You take the money to Yerushalayim, and in Yerushalayim you buy food and you eat the food in Yerushalayim. So there are 2 options. One is to take the fruit to Yerushalayim, and one is to redeem the fruit and take the money to Yerushalayim. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer ad sheyacholu. Until you remove the kedusha from the fruit tree, you have a sapling. He learns this from a pasuk. But what this means is that if you are in the 4th year and you redeem the fruit and put the kedusha of the fruit on the money, and eventually you're going to take the money to Yerushalayim to eat, to buy food in Yerushalayim and eat the food in Yerushalayim, you have removed the kedusha from the fruit in the 4th year. The fruit of the 4th year is no longer holy. You've redeemed the fruit and put the kedusha on the money. From that point, where you remove the kedusha from the fruit by being poda it, finished. Now it's no longer a sapling, it has the halacha of a tree. However, if you don't redeem the fruit in the 4th year, and you take the fruit to eat in Yerushalayim, which means the fruit is still holy, then it's a sapling for another year. The fruit that will grow in the 5th year will be considered sapling, it'll be considered mature tree fruit. So again, the whole point here is, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he learns it out of a pasuk, Untitled Chapter. If you redeem the fruit in the 4th year, the fruit's no longer holy, that tree is no longer a sapling, it's a mature tree for the halacha. If, however, you don't redeem the fruit with money, you pick the fruit to take it to Yerushalayim and eat it in Yerushalayim, which means the fruit remains holy, then the tree remains a sapling until the 5th year, and then it becomes a mature tree. That's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Bashev Ashonim. Rabbi Yeshua says a tree remains a sapling for 7 years. We'll maybe go into that tomorrow, Bli Neder, where he gets the 7 years from. I'll just try to finish this issue of the definition of a sapling. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Netia Kishma, and the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. He says, Netia, let's take a look at the Rav at the top of page 397. Netia Kishma, Bash Shanasa, Kruya Netia Vasulo. A Netia means a planting. Linatoa, neta, to plant. Rabbi Akiva says something is called a sapling, a netia, in the first year. For 1 year after you plant it, it's a sapling. After that, it's not called a netia. Netia has the connotation of it's a fresh planting. Something is a tree is freshly planted for a year. After a year, it's no longer a sapling. That's the Rab. This is a statement, in other words, by Rabbi Akiva. Pirish Acher, the Rab says, there's another explanation to Rabbi Akiva. Kishma. Rabbi Akiva said a netia is kishma. A netia is a netia. What's the name of netia? Netia. So that's what it means. What does that mean? Kol zman shebnei adam koren la netia, v'ein koren la ila. Kishma means the name. So long as the common name given by people is netia, it is a netia. Once people stop using the word netia and say ilan, then it's a mature tree. And that, generally speaking, in the jargon of those days, was a tree that was about within a year, somewhere in there. People would look at it and say, oh, Reuven planted some netias. Once a year passed, the people didn't refer to that tree any longer as netia. They called it an elan. And therefore, the 1 year, Rabbi Akiva says, is the point at which there's a change from sapling to mature tree. And halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. So if we go back to all our halachas, all the halachas of sapling, the esenetios, that you can plow until Rosh Hashanah, so long as they're spread out, means that these are 10 trees, each of which is less than a year old. If any of them are older than a year, you don't have a sapling tree field, and therefore you don't have the permission to plow until Rosh Hashanah. In order for the tree to be considered an ilan, a mature tree, it's older than a year. So if you go into the field and there are 3 trees that are older than a year, and each of them gives off a pound of that fig cake, and each of them is 4 amos away from each other, you can then plow that whole state ilan until Shavuos. If one of those 3 trees can't give up the pound of fig, or one of those 3 trees is planted less than a year, or the 3 trees are not 4 amos away from each other, you don't have a stay ilan either. Okay, so in order to have a stay ilan, a mature tree field, 3 trees, 4 amos apart from each other, each of them gives off a pound of fig cake, and each of the trees is more than a year old, you have a halachic mature tree field. You can plow the field until Shavuos. Failing one of those, you don't have a tree field. A sapling field, you have 10 spread out in the Beit Sa'ah. Each of them is 4 amos away from each other. Each of them is less than a year old. You now have a halachic sapling tree field, and you can plow that field until Rosh Hashanah. Okay. We'll continue tomorrow with the rest of the Mishnah, and Yetchem finish the first perek of Shviis and begin the second perek of Shviis, which also it talks about a grain field and the bean field. Remember, perek Aleph talks about mature tree fields, sapling tree fields. Perek Beis is going to talk about that grain field and that bean field that we've talked about that you can only plow until Pesach. And then the Mishnah is going to go into other halachas of Tosfos Shviis. Again, Sheibana based on Migdash from Hev Yameinu, and we'll be able to be Makayim all these halachas of Tosfos Shviis.